Adolf Hitler, shaped by rejection, failure, and the hatred that grew in silence. One broken man, fueled by bitterness, who convinced a nation to follow him into madness. What began with a wounded ego ended in global wars, genocide, and scars the world still carries today. Because his story didn't end in a bunker, its consequences are still unfolding.
Adolf Hitler was born on April 20th, 1889, in a small town in Austria. His father, Alois, was strict, violent, a man who demanded obedience and control. His mother, Clara, was the opposite, gentle and nurturing. He adored her. From a young age, Hitler was rebellious. He clashed constantly with his father, especially over one thing, his future. Alois wanted him to work in government, but Hitler had other dreams. He wanted to paint, to become an artist. When his father died in 1903, Hitler was 14. He dropped out of school a few years later. By 18, he moved to Vienna, chasing his dream of art. But Vienna didn't welcome him. He applied to the Academy of Fine Arts twice and was rejected both times. The school said his work lacked talent. He was crushed and broke. Soon, Hitler was living in homeless shelters, selling postcards on the street. And during this time, something began to fester. In the alleys and coffee houses of Vienna, he was exposed to a toxic mix of radical nationalism, racism, and anti-Semitism. He wasn't just angry at the world for his failures. He started blaming others, especially the Jews. It was here, not in the battlefield, not in politics, but in poverty, that the hatred began to grow.
In 1914, World War I broke out, and for Hitler, it was salvation. He left Austria and joined the German army. For the first time in his life, he felt like he mattered. The chaos of war gave him structure. The uniform gave him identity. The battlefield gave him purpose. He served as a messenger on the front lines, a dangerous role. He fought in the trenches, faced death, was wounded, decorated with 2 medals for bravery. While millions hated the war, Hitler loved it. He found pride in it, brotherhood, belonging. But in 1918, it ended. And for Hitler, the end of the war felt like betrayal. Germany lost, and it lost big. The Treaty of Versailles humiliated the nation. Germany was blamed for the war, forced to disarm, and hit with crushing financial reparations. To many Germans, it felt like being stabbed in the back. To Hitler, it was worse. He saw the surrender not as defeat, but as treason. He blamed weak politicians. He blamed communists. And above all, he blamed the Jews. That hatred he carried from Vienna now had fuel.
After the war, Hitler stayed in the army, but the battlefield was gone. So they gave him a new mission: spy on political groups in Munich. That's how he discovered a small fringe group, the German Workers' Party, anti-communist, anti-Semitic, nationalist. But instead of spying on them, he joined them, and almost immediately he took over. He had no formal training, no experience, but when he spoke, people listened. Hitler knew how to tap into anger. He didn't talk politics, he talked pain, Germany's pain, the people's pain, and he gave them someone to blame. In 1920, the party changed its name to the Nazi Party, and Hitler, he wasn't just a member anymore.
He was the face, the voice, the fury behind the movement.
In 1923, Hitler thought he was ready to take power. Inspired by Mussolini's March on Rome, he tried to do the same in Munich. Armed with stormtroopers, he stormed a beer hall, fired a pistol into the air, and declared a revolution. But it collapsed in a day. Police opened fire. Hitler was arrested. He was charged with treason and sentenced to 5 years in prison. But here's the twist. The trial made him a national figure, and in prison he wrote the book that would define his ideology, Mein Kampf, My Struggle. It was a rant, a blueprint filled with racism, German supremacy, and the idea that democracy had to die. He only served 9 months, and when he walked out, he wasn't a failed revolutionary anymore. He was a man with a plan.
The 1920s were chaos in Germany. Hyperinflation ruined the economy. People needed wheelbarrows just to buy bread. Unemployment soared. Desperation spread. And the Weimar Republic, Germany's new democracy, looked weak, fragile, and doomed. Amid the noise, Hitler rebranded. No more failed revolutions, no more armed takeovers. He would take power legally. The Nazi Party entered elections. They ran on fear, pride, and nationalism. They promised strength, revenge, and a return to glory. And slowly, it worked. By 1930, they were the second largest party. By 1932, the largest. But Hitler still wasn't chancellor. President Paul von Hindenburg, a World War I hero, saw Hitler as dangerous, loud, untrustworthy. He refused to give him power. But the elites behind the scenes, they thought they could control Hitler. So in January 1933, they made a fatal mistake. They made him Chancellor of Germany. Legally, no gunfire, no coup, just politics. But once he had power, he never let it go.
Just 1 month into Hitler's chancellorship, the Reichstag, Germany's parliament building, was set on fire. To this day, no one knows exactly who did it, but Hitler blamed the communists. He called it a national emergency. Then came the Enabling Act, a law that gave him full dictatorial powers. He could now make laws without parliament. Legally, Germany was no longer a republic. It was a dictatorship.
Over the next few years, Hitler moved fast. He banned all political parties except the Nazis. Trade unions were crushed. Opposition leaders jailed or killed. The SS and Gestapo became his eyes and fists. Fear ruled the streets. Propaganda flooded schools, radios, theaters. Hitler was painted not just as a leader, but as Germany's savior. The salute, the swastika, the speeches, they weren't just symbols. They were tools designed to hypnotize a broken nation, and millions followed. But Hitler didn't just want power over Germany. He wanted to reshape the world. Once Hitler secured power, the Nazis turned their focus inward, toward purity. They didn't just want a strong Germany. They wanted a racially pure Germany. Jews, Roma, disabled people, black Germans, communists, anyone considered unfit or dangerous to Nazi ideals became targets. In 1935, the Nuremberg laws stripped Jews of citizenship. They couldn't vote, couldn't marry non-Jews, couldn't hold government jobs. Overnight, families who had lived in Germany for generations became stateless. Storefronts were smashed, synagogues burned, children were taught the Jews were the enemy. Hatred was institutionalized. not just encouraged, engineered. Then came Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass, November 9th, 1938. Coordinated violence across Germany. Hundreds of synagogues burned, thousands of Jewish businesses destroyed, 30,000 Jewish men thrown into concentration camps just for being Jewish. As Hitler crushed resistance at home, his eyes turned outward. First, he rebuilt the military, violating the Treaty of Versailles. Then, in 1936, he sent troops into the Rhineland. France and Britain protested, but didn't act. In 1938, he annexed Austria in what he called the Anschluss. Again, no war, just cheers. Then came the Sudetenland, a part of Czechoslovakia. Hitler claimed he was just protecting German-speaking people. At the Munich conference, Britain and France caved. They gave it to him, hoping it would satisfy his hunger. But it didn't. It only fed the fire. On September 1, 1939, Germany invaded Poland. 2 days later, Britain and France declared war. World War II had begun.
At first, Germany dominated. Poland fell in weeks. France collapsed in months. Nazi flags flew over Paris. Bombs rained on London. But behind the battlefields, something far worse was unfolding. Ghettos were created, crowded, disease-ridden zones where Jews were forced to live. Food was rationed, medicine denied. Then came the Einsatzgruppen, mobile killing squads. They followed the army, rounding up Jews and shooting them en masse into pits. Tens of thousands were killed this way. But even that wasn't efficient enough. So the Nazis built factories of death. Auschwitz, Treblinka, Sobibor, Majdanek, gas chambers, crematoria, trains packed with families who never returned. This was the final solution. Not just murder, industrialized genocide. By the end of it all, 6 million Jews were dead. It was the darkest chapter in human history, orchestrated by a man who promised greatness.
By 1943, the tide had turned. Germany was being pushed back on all fronts. The Soviet Red Army advanced from the east. The Allies invaded from the west. City by city, Germany crumbled. Berlin was bombed into dust. April 1945, the Third Reich was collapsing. Soviet forces were closing in on Berlin. Above ground, the city was burning. Below it, Hitler was trapped in his Führer bunker, sick, paranoid, and delusional. And by his side, Eva Braun. She had been with him for over a decade, mostly in the shadows. But now, with the world ending around them, they stood side by side. In a brief, surreal ceremony, they were married underground, not in triumph, but in fear, not in celebration, but in surrender. Less than 48 hours later, they were together, gone. Hitler shot himself in the head, and Eva took cyanide to end her life. Their bodies were burned in the garden, as per his final orders, trying to erase what was left of a nightmare. Germany surrendered shortly after. The war was over, but the scars, they never fully healed.
And the consequences were just beginning. Europe didn't want the surviving Jews. Western powers closed their doors and opened someone else's. They told them to go to Palestine, but Palestine was already home to another people. In 1948, Israel was declared, and in its creation,
Over 700,000 Palestinians were forced out, villages destroyed, families exiled, a nation erased. And in a cruel twist of history, those who once suffered began causing suffering. Walls, bombings, checkpoints, blockades. The same tactics once used to isolate Jews are now used against Palestinians. Today, Gaza is under siege. Families live in rubble. Hospitals are bombed. Food is cut off. Children are starving, not by accident, but by design. And yet, the home people resist against tanks, against jets. This isn't the Holocaust, but it is our generation's tragedy. And if we don't learn from history, we're doomed to echo its worst chapters.